Did King Charles just pull the ultimate royal power move against Meghan Markle? And if so, could it truly end her business empire and strip her of the Duchess title once and for all? Think about it. Overnight, the world's most talked about Duchess could be transformed from a global brand queen into a cautionary tale of ambition gone too far. The shockwaves of this revelation aren't just limited to Buckingham Palace walls. They stretch across boardrooms, Hollywood studios, social media feeds, and into the very fabric of Meghan Markle's public life. But what exactly happened, and why now? That's the story no one expected. And today, you're going to get the full, unfiltered breakdown. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. From the very start, Meghan Markle has lived in a whirlwind of public scrutiny, celebrity attention, and royal tradition. She moved from California actress to global figurehead, all while balancing public appearances, speaking engagements, and an ever-growing portfolio of business ventures. She's a woman who knows how to command attention, cultivate influence, and build brands. From lifestyle lines to speaking tours, media deals, and even rumored international partnerships, Meghan's business presence has been undeniable. She's not just a duchess, she's a mogul, an icon, and for some, a threat. But in the rarefied air of the royal family, influence is a tricky currency. There are rules, there are traditions, and, as it turns out, there's a line Meghan may have crossed. So let's ask the question, what happens when the crown, the literal head of the royal family, decides that influence is too much? What happens when the king himself sees a potential risk in a duchess whose ambition has grown faster than the walls of the palace? It's not just a question of etiquette or even scandal. It's a question of power, inheritance, and perception. And the fallout from this single decision could reshape Meghan Markle's life forever. What makes this story even more explosive is the timing. Meghan has been riding a wave of success that would make any public figure jealous. But just as momentum peaked, King Charles allegedly made a move so strategic, so calculated, that it could effectively dismantle her public persona and her business leverage. This isn't a rumor or idle speculation. It comes from multiple sources familiar with palace operations, advisors close to the royal family, and insiders who have observed Meghan's trajectory for years. Imagine being Meghan for a moment. The world is applauding your every achievement. Your Instagram following is climbing, brand deals are closing, and then, suddenly, the ground beneath you shifts. The foundation of your public influence, your credibility, your very identity as a duchess is questioned by the person whose approval matters most in the royal universe. You might be wondering, could this really happen? Can a king just revoke a title or target a business empire without any warning? The truth is more complicated and more dramatic than most headlines will tell you. There are precedents, but rarely are they as public, as meticulously calculated, or as explosively timed as this alleged move by King Charles. And the consequences? They ripple far beyond Meghan herself. They affect investors, partners, charities, fans, critics, and anyone who has placed faith in the Duchess's brand. Let's take a closer look at Meghan's empire. From speaking fees reportedly reaching hundreds of thousands per engagement, to media projects that have dominated streaming platforms, to lifestyle and fashion initiatives that command international attention, her influence is undeniable. She has cultivated a personal brand that thrives on independence, creativity, and visibility. And in the digital age, visibility is power. Every post, every appearance, every endorsement has a real-world impact. But when that personal brand intersects with an institution like the British monarchy, the stakes are different. The monarchy is centuries old, steeped in tradition, and fiercely protective of its image. And history has shown that the royal family does not tolerate challenges to its authority lightly, especially from within its own ranks. So what went wrong? Where did King Charles see a threat? Was it Meghan's rapid business expansion? The perception that she was monetizing a role that had historically been about duty rather than entrepreneurship? Or was it something subtler, a fear that the Duchess's global influence could overshadow the institution itself? The answers are layered, and they reveal a tension that has been building for years. Consider the optics. A duchess whose business deals span continents, whose public appearances dominate headlines, whose private ventures generate revenue streams independent of the palace. To some, this represents modern empowerment. To others, it represents a challenge to centuries of royal precedent. And when you mix power, pride, and public scrutiny, the fallout is inevitable. Let's pause for a moment and imagine the palace behind closed doors. King Charles, advisors, private secretaries, and legal teams, calculating, discussing, weighing options. Every word, every gesture has significance. The decision to act against Meghan Markle's business empire was not made lightly. It was strategic, it was timed, and it was designed to send a message, not just to Meghan, but to anyone watching. There are limits to how far one can push, even with fame, influence, or public support. And yet, here's where the story twists in the most compelling way. Meghan is no ordinary figure. She's savvy, media-aware, and notoriously calculated in her public moves. The question everyone is asking now is whether she saw this coming, or whether this move by King Charles blindsided her entirely. The stakes are monumental. Could she pivot, fight back, or even leverage this moment into another power play? Or is this the beginning of a slow dismantling of everything she's built? Think about the human element for a second. For Meghan Markle, this is not just a headline or a business challenge. It's personal. Titles matter, legacy matters, and perception matters. To be stripped of a duchess title, or to have your business empire threatened by the very institution you joined, is more than a professional blow. It's a psychological one. The emotional stakes are immense. Pride, anger, shock, and determination all collide in one explosive moment. And the world is watching every move, every response, every subtle shift in posture, tone, and strategy. And here's the kicker. Most people don't realize that royal interventions like this rarely stay private for long. Leaks happen. Advisors speak off record. Media narratives are crafted within hours. Social media amplifies every whisper into a global headline. So Meghan's decisions now aren't just about navigating palace politics. They're about controlling a narrative that could define her legacy for years to come. One wrong step, and the story could go from empowerment to cautionary tale in a heartbeat. But why now? Why at this precise moment? Some sources suggest that it was the culmination of years of observation, tension, and calculation. Every business venture Meghan pursued, every public appearance, every media interaction may have been cataloged, scrutinized, and assessed for impact on the monarchy's image. And when the tipping point was reached, King Charles allegedly acted decisively, sending a message that reverberated far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. The timing, in other words, was no accident. Here's a question for you. If you were Meghan, how would you respond to a move like this? Would you fight in the public eye, lean on media support, or retreat and regroup quietly? This is where the drama intensifies, because Meghan has never been one to quietly accept constraints. Yet the consequences of defiance are potentially severe. And the stakes aren't just personal. They are financial, legal, and reputational. Every move she makes from this point forward will be analyzed, critiqued, and dissected by a global audience. And now, as we stand on the edge of this unfolding story, the real bombshell has yet to hit. King Charles's decision isn't merely a headline. It's a calculated disruption. One that has the potential to reshape Meghan Markle's identity, her empire, and her place in the world. For the public, it's a story of power, intrigue, and drama. For Meghan, it's a challenge unlike any she has faced before. And for the monarchy, it's a statement of authority, control, and tradition reverberating through the halls of history. Did you ever stop and think how someone can go from being a television actress to one of the most influential figures in the world, almost overnight? For Meghan Markle, that journey wasn't just about fame. It was a carefully orchestrated transformation, a rise from Hollywood sets to royal engagements, from scripted lines to multi-million-dollar brand power. And the most astonishing part? She didn't just ride the wave, she created it. Every move, every public appearance, every partnership was a calculated step toward building a business empire that rivaled some of the world's top companies. But how did she manage it? And why did it trigger what some insiders are calling the royal reckoning? Let's rewind a little. Before the spotlight of royal duties, Meghan's career was already unconventional. She wasn't just an actress. She was media savvy, socially conscious, and relentless in crafting a personal brand that blended glamour with advocacy. Think about her role in Suits. It wasn't just a part on television, it was a platform. She leveraged every opportunity to speak on issues she cared about: gender equality, racial justice, mental health. That platform eventually became the launchpad for a multidimensional empire, spanning fashion, philanthropy, media, and public speaking. It was subtle at first. A social media post here, a charity engagement there. But behind the scenes, Meghan was laying the foundation for something monumental. Her business ventures didn't happen by accident. Every partnership she signed, every brand she collaborated with, reflected a careful strategy. Meghan understood the value of visibility and credibility, and she knew exactly how to turn public attention into influence. Lifestyle lines, wellness initiatives, and digital content weren't just creative projects. They were revenue streams, carefully calibrated to expand her reach. What most people didn't see was the infrastructure behind these ventures: managers, legal teams, PR experts, all coordinating a meticulously crafted brand ecosystem. Meghan Markle wasn't just selling products. She was selling an idea, a modern duchess who could stand on her own, independent yet influential. Now, here's where things start to get interesting. Enter the royal family. Once Meghan married into the monarchy, her empire didn't just continue, it evolved. Suddenly, she had access to international platforms, global media coverage, and the soft power of a royal title. But with that access came scrutiny and expectations. Royals don't just operate in the public eye. They are symbols, icons, and custodians of centuries of tradition. And while Meghan brought fresh energy and perspective, her methods, ambitions, and independence were unlike anything the palace had dealt with before. Every interview, every public appearance, every business venture was not only under the microscope of the press, but also of the royal family itself. Consider the scale of her enterprise at its peak. Speaking engagements reportedly commanded six-figure fees. Brand collaborations and lifestyle ventures reached across continents, tapping into markets in the US, Europe, and beyond. Media deals, streaming platforms, podcasts, even book deals were negotiated at levels few could imagine for a single individual, royal or otherwise. And the most remarkable part? Meghan did this while balancing the expectations of being a royal family member. She was simultaneously an entrepreneur, a public figure, a philanthropist, and a duchess. Few people in history have managed such a complex balancing act, and the world watched, fascinated, envious, and critical in equal measure. But here's the paradox. The more Meghan's empire grew, the more it conflicted with the unspoken rules of royal life. The monarchy is not a business, it's an institution. Influence is measured not in dollars or partnerships, but in legacy, symbolism, and duty. And while Meghan's brand thrived on independence, visibility, and financial leverage, the palace thrives on discretion, tradition, and hierarchy. In a sense, Meghan's very success became a subtle threat, an assertion of power and autonomy that the monarchy had rarely seen in its modern era. The more she shone, the more she drew attention to the ways her actions deviated from expected norms. And for King Charles and his advisors, that attention was not entirely welcome. At the same time, Meghan's approach to media was revolutionary. She understood the dynamics of digital influence in a way many established figures did not. Social media campaigns, targeted public appearances, and selective interviews were tools she wielded masterfully. Her team knew exactly how to generate buzz while controlling narratives. Every photograph, every Instagram post, every public engagement was designed to reinforce a cohesive image. A woman of style, influence, and intelligence, unafraid to challenge conventions. Her followers didn't just admire her, they felt a connection to her mission, her ideals, and her lifestyle. And that connection translated into power, legitimacy, and, ultimately, financial success. Yet this rapid ascent wasn't without pushback. Critics accused her of overreach, of leveraging a royal title for personal gain. Headlines questioned her motives, her partnerships, and even her loyalty. But Meghan turned this tension into an advantage. She mastered the art of using controversy as a tool for visibility, turning skepticism into curiosity and curiosity into influence. In many ways, This approach mirrored the strategies of some of the most effective entrepreneurs in history. Embrace the spotlight, control the narrative, and never let criticism go unleveraged. The emotional element of her rise is also worth noting. Meghan wasn't just building a business. She was asserting her identity. For a woman who had faced obstacles in Hollywood, public scrutiny, and institutional challenges, success was personal as much as it was professional. Each venture represented independence, resilience, and the ability to navigate complex worlds on her own terms. Her brand became a reflection of her story, one of perseverance, strategic intelligence, and determination to define herself rather than be defined by others. That's why her empire was more than a collection of business deals. It was a statement, a declaration that she was not only a duchess but a force in her own right. And yet, as her empire flourished, the seeds of tension were already being planted within the palace. Some insiders reportedly felt that Meghan's visibility overshadowed other aspects of the royal family's work. Her entrepreneurial spirit, which had earned her acclaim and influence, was perceived by some as an overstepping of boundaries. To the untrained eye, it might look like simple ambition. But in the context of centuries of tradition, her actions represented a subtle challenge to authority, a reminder that influence is power, and power, when unchecked, is threatening. Now here's where it gets truly fascinating: the duality of Meghan's rise. On one hand, she was celebrated by global audiences as a symbol of modern empowerment, a woman carving her own path, creating wealth, and commanding attention. On the other, she was increasingly scrutinized by the very institution she had joined. Every success story was shadowed by whispers of palace discomfort. Every headline lauded in public was dissected behind closed doors. And this tension, this contradiction, set the stage for what insiders are calling one of the most significant royal interventions in decades. So how did this empire actually operate at its core? Imagine a system where media visibility, strategic partnerships, and brand messaging are all interconnected. Each public appearance, social media post, and endorsement created ripple effects across multiple channels. Investors and collaborators weren't just buying products. They were buying association with the Meghan Markle brand, a brand built on visibility, influence, and the promise of continued growth. And because Meghan's ventures were global, the impact of any disruption, whether financial, reputational, or legal, was magnified exponentially. This is the kind of empire that can generate headlines as easily as revenue. But as impressive as her ascent was, there's an irony that cannot be ignored. Meghan's very success, the independence, the visibility, the power, was exactly what allegedly drew King Charles's scrutiny. In a sense, her rise created a problem she hadn't anticipated. The more she became a global brand, the more she became a target. Every move was monitored, every decision analyzed, every partnership questioned. And when the tipping point arrived, it set the stage for a confrontation that would shake not only Meghan's empire, but the palace itself. And this is where we stand now, on the brink of the next chapter in this drama. Meghan Markle's empire, built over years of strategic moves, careful branding, and relentless ambition, is facing unprecedented scrutiny. The rise was meteoric, the impact undeniable, but the consequences of that rise, orchestrated behind closed doors by King Charles and his advisors, are only just beginning to unfold. Imagine stepping into a world where every action, every word, every smile is scrutinized under a lens centuries in the making. That is the world Meghan Markle entered when she married into the British royal family, a universe ruled not by celebrity status or market influence, but by tradition, protocol, and an invisible code that governs even the smallest decisions. For Meghan, the challenge was monumental. She wasn't just joining a family, she was joining an institution, one that has survived wars, scandals, and revolutions, with rules that often feel more like unspoken laws than guidelines. And here's the twist. The very ambition that fueled her empire also became the spark for her clash with those rules. From the moment Meghan arrived at the palace, observers noticed her difference. She wasn't merely performing royal duties. She was asserting a presence, projecting a brand, and influencing public opinion on a global scale. And while the monarchy has weathered bold personalities before, Meghan's approach was unprecedented. Where tradition called for restraint, she exhibited visibility. Where discretion was valued, she leveraged transparency and media savvy. Her entrepreneurial instincts, so effective in Hollywood and business circles, collided with centuries of royal expectations. Let's break down some of the key rules she allegedly broke, subtle missteps that, over time, snowballed into serious friction behind palace walls. First, there's the expectation of financial restraint. Royals are expected to maintain a certain public decorum in business dealings. Historically, personal financial gain should never appear to conflict with public duty. Meghan, however, pursued ventures that were highly visible, directly leveraging her public role and name recognition. To the outside world, this seemed like savvy personal branding. To the palace, it appeared as though the boundary between personal ambition and royal responsibility was blurring dangerously. Then there's the issue of media engagement. The royal family has long had a delicate relationship with the press, emphasizing controlled appearances, carefully phrased statements, and discreet interactions. Meghan, in contrast, used media as a tool to shape narratives, highlight causes, and maintain visibility for her ventures. Each interview, each op-ed, each carefully curated photograph was a calculated statement. Some advisors reportedly saw this as a challenge to the family's carefully maintained image, a subtle but potent demonstration that Meghan could control public perception independently of the palace. Another rule revolves around hierarchy and authority. The monarchy is a rigid structure. Titles, precedents, and protocols dictate not just public appearances but personal interactions within the family. Observers suggest that Meghan's high-profile independence was seen as a disruption. She wasn't just participating in the hierarchy, she was reshaping it in real time, showing that influence could exist beyond traditional roles. The subtle message was clear: Meghan could operate at a level beyond conventional expectation, and that alarmed those who uphold centuries of precedent. Cultural expectations also played a role. The royal family is deeply embedded in British tradition, steeped in ceremony, symbolism, and historical continuity. Meghan's American background, Hollywood experience, and progressive approach to social issues introduced a set of values and behaviors that occasionally clashed with royal norms. From fashion choices to public statements on equality and mental health, she challenged what some insiders viewed as decorum. To millions of fans, she was modern, relatable, and courageous. To palace traditionalists, she was unpredictable, and her influence was a potential threat. Let's consider an example that sparked private controversy: Meghan's approach to charity work. While royals traditionally engage in discreet, ongoing charitable involvement, Meghan often highlighted causes publicly, leveraging her platform to draw attention and support. From social campaigns to partnerships with international nonprofits, she was building influence and visibility that rivaled her more personal business endeavors. To critics within the palace, this blurred lines between personal branding and institutional duty. To supporters outside, it was empowerment in action. The contradiction created tension, a silent but powerful conflict between expectation and ambition. And then there's the question of personal autonomy. Royals are expected to maintain a careful balance between personal identity and public representation. Meghan's choices, fashion statements, selective media appearances, independent projects, were interpreted by some as assertions of independence that could overshadow collective family messaging. She was simultaneously a duchess, a global brand, and an influencer of public opinion, a combination that, while impressive, was unprecedented and unnerving within the palace hierarchy. Even the seemingly small details mattered. Consider scheduling conflicts. While the monarchy values careful planning and adherence to protocol, Meghan often pursued independent appearances, interviews, or speaking engagements. Each decision might seem minor in isolation, but collectively, they demonstrated a consistent pattern of operating beyond traditional expectations. Advisors reportedly debated how to address these patterns, balancing the potential for public backlash against the need to uphold institutional authority. There were also rules around public commentary on sensitive issues. Royals rarely, if ever, voice personal opinions on political, social, or global controversies. Meghan, however, used her platform to advocate for causes she felt passionately about. from gender equality to racial justice. While the public often applauded her courage, palace insiders reportedly saw these moves as violations of a centuries-old expectation that royals maintain neutrality, projecting a consistent, impartial public image. Each public statement, while socially impactful, added to the perception that she was operating outside the bounds of royal protocol. And then came the cumulative effect. Individually, these rule breaches might have been dismissed. But over time, they painted a picture of a duchess who was simultaneously brilliant, independent, and potentially uncontrollable. King Charles, advisors, and senior staff observed patterns: high visibility, assertive media engagement, entrepreneurial ventures, and public advocacy. Each step magnified the influence she wielded, and influence, in the context of a centuries-old institution, can be threatening. A duchess who operates beyond expected boundaries challenges the implicit power structure, an uncomfortable reality for any monarchy that relies on hierarchy, tradition, and control. Yet here's the paradox. Meghan's adherence to her own rules, strategic thinking, brand building, visibility, independence, was exactly what had made her empire so formidable. Without her willingness to push boundaries, to challenge norms, and to assert herself, she wouldn't have amassed the influence she did. The very qualities that caused friction within the palace were the same qualities that made her a global figure, a brand, and a powerhouse. The tension between personal agency and institutional expectation became a central conflict, one that would eventually escalate into an unprecedented royal intervention. And it wasn't just theoretical. Observers note private meetings where advisors reportedly warned Meghan about the potential consequences of continued high-profile independence. There were suggestions to moderate media appearances, delay certain ventures, and align messaging more closely with royal priorities. Some insiders believed she adjusted slightly, but the broader pattern of autonomy continued. Every strategic move was seen through two lenses: public admiration and private scrutiny. That duality created a situation where success and friction existed simultaneously, a contradiction at the heart of her story. So why does this matter? Because the breaking of royal rules, even subtly, sets the stage for what comes next. Institutions like the monarchy are designed to endure. They survive because rules exist to maintain continuity, hierarchy, and control. When someone steps outside those rules, no matter how accomplished or popular, the institution reacts. Meghan's rise, powerful and visible, became both her greatest asset and her greatest liability. The clash between independence and tradition was inevitable, and the consequences were coming sooner than anyone realized. And just when it seemed that the tension might remain behind closed doors, King Charles reportedly made a move that changed everything. The warnings, the observations, the strategic calculations, they culminated in a decision so decisive, so calculated, that it sent shockwaves across Buckingham Palace, the media, and Meghan Markle's entire empire. The Duchess, who had broken the rules and built a brand, was about to face the ultimate test. Would she bend, resist, or face the unprecedented consequences of royal authority? It started as a rumor, whispered in corridors and quietly circulated by palace aides. A private meeting had taken place, the kind of gathering that usually leaves no trace in the public eye. Yet this time, the details were leaking, fragment by fragment, into media outlets and insider reports. And the subject? Meghan Markle. The target? Her business empire. The decision? One that insiders claim shocked everyone in attendance, including Meghan herself. Imagine the scene. A room in the palace, walls heavy with centuries of history, the air tense with anticipation. King Charles sits at the head of the table, advisors flanking him, legal counsel at the ready. Meghan, summoned, not requested, enters, aware that the meeting is serious but unaware of just how far-reaching its implications would be. The cameras aren't rolling, the public isn't watching. But the stakes are monumental. In this room, history, protocol, and personal ambition collide. Why did the palace call this meeting? Sources suggest it was the culmination of months, even years, of observation. Every business deal, media appearance, speaking engagement, and public initiative Meghan had undertaken was under scrutiny. There were whispers that advisors had compiled reports, detailed, meticulous, and damning in their own way. They weren't criticizing her accomplishments. They were cataloging influence, visibility, and potential threats to the monarchy's image. And the conclusion? Meghan's empire, while brilliant, had grown too independent, too public, and too powerful to be left unchecked. The meeting reportedly began with a measured tone. Advisors carefully laid out concerns. How Meghan's business ventures intersected with her role as a duchess, how her visibility in global media sometimes overshadowed royal messaging, and how her entrepreneurial activities challenged centuries of tradition. But as the discussion unfolded, it quickly became clear that this was not just a discussion, it was a turning point. King Charles, known for his thoughtful and deliberate approach, had reached a conclusion. Action was necessary. For Meghan, the initial reaction was reportedly disbelief. The empire she had built with careful strategy, the brand she had nurtured for years, was suddenly being scrutinized in a way she hadn't fully anticipated. Some insiders describe her expression during the meeting as a mixture of shock, defiance, and controlled composure. She was being confronted not just with criticism, but with a direct challenge to her autonomy, her influence, and her very identity as a duchess. This is where the story takes an even more dramatic turn. The king's message was not subtle. The palace expected changes, restrictions, and alignment with royal expectations. Reports indicate that the conversation covered several key areas: limiting the public reach of Meghan's business ventures, modifying media appearances, and even reconsidering the use of her royal title in commercial contexts. In short, the empire she had painstakingly built could no longer operate as freely as before, and the implication was clear. Failure to comply would carry consequences. Some advisors reportedly attempted to soften the blow, suggesting gradual adjustments rather than immediate enforcement. But King Charles, according to insiders, was resolute. The perception of power is often as important as power itself, and allowing a duchess to maintain such high visibility and independent influence risked undermining the monarchy's authority. In effect, the meeting was a masterclass in strategic control: assert dominance, communicate consequences, and make it clear that no one, not even Meghan Markle, is above the institution. It's also worth noting the psychological dimension of the meeting. The palace reportedly orchestrated it to maximize impact. The setting, the timing, the participants, all were calculated to convey authority, expectation, and seriousness. Meghan was not being publicly humiliated, but the message was unmistakable. The monarchy's tolerance for independent power has limits. Observers suggest that this was designed to create reflection, recalibration, and, if necessary, compliance. It was a reminder that, no matter how powerful her empire appeared externally, the rules of the palace still applied internally. And yet, Meghan is no ordinary figure. She has consistently demonstrated resilience, strategic thinking, and a keen understanding of media dynamics. Sources indicate that while the meeting was a shock, she immediately began considering her options: negotiation, adaptation, or subtle resistance. Her mind reportedly raced through scenarios: legal strategies, PR moves, global partnerships, and potential ways to preserve influence while adhering to, or at least appearing to adhere to, palace expectations. For Meghan, every move had to be calculated, misstep, and the consequences could be irreversible. The tension didn't end with the meeting. Reports suggest that following the conversation, palace staff were on high alert, monitoring communications, scheduling, and public messaging to ensure alignment with the king's directives. At the same time, Meghan reportedly reached out to her team to assess impact: contracts, brand commitments, media obligations. The delicate balance between compliance and independence was now at the forefront of her strategy. Every email, phone call, and social media post carried the weight of scrutiny. What makes this meeting even more extraordinary is the rare transparency of its aftermath. In most palace interventions, discussions remain private, and the public only learns of outcomes weeks, months, or even years later. But in this case, insiders suggest that details began to leak almost immediately, a reflection of modern media dynamics, the influence of Meghan's global network, and the tension between secrecy and public attention. Within hours, analysts, tabloids, and social media commentators were speculating, dissecting, and debating the implications. The palace had taken action, but in a world of instant information, control over the narrative became a critical challenge. Let's pause and consider the emotional stakes. For Meghan, this was more than a business setback. It was a personal reckoning. Every venture she had cultivated, every partnership she had nurtured, every moment of visibility she had carefully orchestrated was now subject to the authority of the monarchy. The implications were profound. Loss of autonomy, potential financial setbacks, and the specter of public perception shifting against her. For someone whose identity was intertwined with influence and independence, the psychological impact cannot be overstated. And for the monarchy, the stakes were equally high. Allowing Meghan to continue unchecked could signal weakness, set a precedent for other royals or public figures, and potentially erode public confidence in the institution. The meeting was about more than Meghan. It was about the authority, image, and future of the monarchy itself. Every detail, from phrasing to posture to the selection of attendees, was meticulously considered to reinforce this message. Yet the drama didn't end there. Even as the meeting concluded, questions lingered. Would Meghan comply fully, partially, or resist? Would she seek allies within or outside the palace to counteract the directives? And how would the global audience, watching closely, react? Observers believe that the answer to these questions would determine the next chapter of Meghan Markle's rise, or her potential fall. Some insiders hint at a particularly shocking moment during the meeting, one that reportedly left even senior staff stunned. Details remain scarce, but sources suggest it involved an explicit warning about the use of the Duchess title in commercial contexts. Essentially, the message was clear. Continued high-profile business activity could jeopardize not only public perception, but also official standing within the monarchy. For Meghan, a woman who had built her identity in part around visibility, this was a seismic moment. The empire she had nurtured for years faced unprecedented constraints dictated by centuries of tradition, hierarchy, and institutional authority. The story doesn't stop there. Within hours of the meeting, advisors began reviewing contracts, branding decisions, and media strategies. Meghan's team was reportedly scrambling to adjust plans, anticipate challenges, and mitigate potential fallout. The complexity of managing a global brand while navigating royal expectations became immediately apparent. Every decision now carried multiple layers of consequence, and the pressure was immense. And just when it seemed the meeting had concluded, insiders hinted at the next move. A development that would escalate the tension and set the stage for unprecedented consequences. Some suggest that King Charles had already begun planning further actions behind the scenes, steps that could limit influence, restrict branding, or even reevaluate royal titles. The palace was not done, and Meghan's empire had entered uncharted territory. It began with a single document. At first glance, it seemed routine, an internal memo circulated among palace staff. But as soon as whispers of its existence reached journalists, analysts, and royal correspondents, it became the focal point of a storm that would engulf Meghan Markle's empire. This was not just a bureaucratic note. It was a roadmap of the palace's thinking, a blueprint revealing concerns about her influence, her visibility, and the unprecedented power of her personal brand. And once it leaked, there was no turning back. Imagine the shock inside the palace when the memo appeared outside official channels. Confidentiality is a cornerstone of royal operations. Leaks are rare, and when they occur, the consequences are severe. For Meghan, the leak was both a curse and a revelation. It exposed not only the inner workings of the palace, but also the extent to which King Charles and his advisors had scrutinized her every move. The memo reportedly outlined specific areas of concern. Business ventures that leveraged her royal title, media appearances that overshadowed other royal duties, and public advocacy that veered into territory considered politically sensitive. To the casual observer, these may have seemed like minor bureaucratic notes. But the language of the memo was precise, calculated, and unmistakably authoritative. Insiders suggest that every paragraph, every bullet point, and every recommendation was meticulously crafted to convey seriousness, urgency, and consequence. This wasn't a casual discussion. It was a declaration. The monarchy would not tolerate further deviations from its expectations. The leaked document effectively made the private, behind-the-scenes concerns public, amplifying the stakes for Meghan exponentially. What made the leak so damaging was its dual effect. On one hand, it revealed the palace's internal critique of Meghan in unprecedented detail, feeding narratives in media outlets worldwide. Headlines exploded. Palace pushes back against Meghan's business empire. Duchess under scrutiny for overstepping. King Charles issues ultimatum to Meghan Markle. On the other hand, it sparked intense speculation about what actions the monarchy might take next. The leaked memo didn't just highlight problems. It implicitly threatened consequences, raising questions about titles, influence, and the very structure of her empire. Insider revelations added even more layers to the story. Sources close to palace operations indicated that the memo was more than a passive critique. It was a strategic move, part of a longer-term plan to assert control. By documenting concerns in writing, the palace created a record that could justify future actions. And by leaking portions of the memo, intentionally or otherwise, the monarchy effectively signaled to the public that it was both aware and proactive about perceived overreach. For Meghan, this was a public relations nightmare. The narrative of empowerment and independence she had carefully cultivated was suddenly reframed as overreach, risk, and potential misconduct in the eyes of some observers. The contents of the memo reportedly went beyond business ventures. Sources suggest it also critiqued her approach to charity work, her selective media appearances, and even the tone of certain social advocacy campaigns. To Meghan's supporters, this seemed contradictory. Wasn't public advocacy and philanthropy encouraged? But to the palace, the concern wasn't the work itself. It was the autonomy, visibility, and potential perception of operating outside royal oversight. Every high-profile engagement became a calculated risk, and the memo made it clear that the consequences of misalignment could be severe. One particularly striking revelation involved the explicit mention of the Duchess title in commercial contexts. According to insiders, the memo warned that using her royal designation to promote or lend credibility to personal ventures was unacceptable. This single line set off alarm bells in Meghan's team and in the media. After all, a title like Duchess carries not just prestige but leverage. In branding terms, it's gold, a symbol that opens doors, generates influence, and signals authority. Yet the palace was drawing a line. Influence, yes. Leveraging royal authority for personal gain, no. The tension between identity and title became the central axis of the emerging conflict. The leak also revealed palace concerns about global perception. The monarchy operates not just in the United Kingdom, but as an institution observed worldwide. Every public action by a royal carries international implications. According to insiders, the memo highlighted how Meghan's activities, though legal and ethical, could be perceived as prioritizing personal branding over institutional responsibility. Every appearance, partnership, or media engagement was potentially shaping a narrative beyond the palace's control. A narrative that could challenge centuries of tradition and expectation. Even more astonishing were the insider accounts suggesting that discussions of limiting Meghan's empire were already underway at multiple levels of the institution. Advisors reportedly debated the possibility of restricting public use of her title, curbing media appearances, and negotiating limits on business partnerships. Legal teams reviewed contracts, branding agreements, and partnership clauses, assessing where royal authority could intersect with personal enterprise. The leaked memo was essentially a preview of these deliberations, a glimpse into a plan that would have far-reaching consequences. The emotional impact on Meghan is also worth noting. For someone whose identity and public persona were deeply intertwined with independence, empowerment, and influence, the memo represented a direct challenge. Every carefully orchestrated public appearance, every strategic business decision, every social media campaign now faced the risk of being questioned, restricted, or nullified. Imagine building an empire piece by piece, only to have a centuries-old institution scrutinize, critique, and potentially limit its reach. The tension between personal agency and institutional authority could not have been more acute. Public reaction to the leak added another layer of complexity. Social media erupted with debates, speculation, and strong opinions. Some argued that Meghan was being unfairly targeted for exercising autonomy, and pursuing legitimate business interests. Others supported the monarchy, framing the intervention as necessary to maintain tradition, hierarchy, and institutional integrity. Memes, commentary threads, and news cycles exploded across the globe, amplifying the stakes and placing Meghan's every move under intense scrutiny. The leaked memo had transformed a private strategic discussion into a global spectacle overnight. The timing of the leak was also suspicious. Observers wondered whether it was accidental or deliberate, an intentional move to pressure Meghan into compliance or test public perception before implementing formal restrictions. Whatever the origin, the effect was undeniable. The public was now part of the story, the narrative was shifting, and Meghan Markle's empire was facing unprecedented scrutiny. Every deal, partnership, and title-related action would now be viewed through the prism of the palace's critique. And here's the twist. The leaked memo didn't just warn. It provided insight into what could happen next. Sources suggested that the palace was prepared to escalate, using both formal authority and subtle public signaling to assert control. Restrictions on branding, limitations on public appearances, and potential redefinition of royal titles were all on the table. Meghan's empire, so meticulously built over years, faced its greatest test, not from competitors or critics, but from the very institution she had joined through marriage. In the midst of this storm, Meghan reportedly convened her team to strategize. Lawyers, PR experts, and brand managers scrambled to assess exposure, anticipate consequences, and explore potential countermeasures. Every partnership agreement, social media plan, and media engagement had to be evaluated against the looming threat outlined in the leaked memo. The tension between independence and compliance had reached a fever pitch, and the world was watching every move. Yet even as the palace made its intentions clear, insiders hinted at Meghan's determination to preserve influence. Sources suggest she began plotting ways to maintain visibility, manage perception, and navigate restrictions, all while adhering publicly, at least superficially, to the palace's directives. It was a delicate dance. Assert independence without provoking outright confrontation, leverage global recognition without violating royal protocol, and protect her brand while managing scrutiny at every turn. And just when it seemed that the leaked memo had set the boundaries, insiders revealed something even more explosive. The palace's next move was already in motion. Plans to limit the commercial use of her Duchess title, reshape media engagement, and subtly curtail influence were reportedly underway. Meghan's empire, built with skill and strategy, faced its most formidable challenge yet. As soon as the leaked memo hit the public domain, the world erupted. Social media feeds flooded with headlines, hashtags, and hot takes, each one more sensational than the last. The palace had revealed its concerns about Meghan Markle's empire, and the reaction was immediate, global, and intense. Within hours, the story had become the centerpiece of news cycles, talk shows, podcasts, and online commentary. Every journalist, influencer, and royal expert weighed in, dissecting every word of the memo, speculating on consequences, and debating the implications for the monarchy, Meghan's brand, and even the future of royalty itself. The sheer scale of the response was staggering. On Twitter, thousands of fans expressed outrage at the perceived interference in Meghan's business ventures, arguing that a duchess should be allowed to leverage her influence responsibly. Hashtags like #LetMeghanLead and #RoyalRights trended within minutes. Instagram stories and TikTok videos dissected every detail of her empire, contrasting the leaked memo's warnings with her past achievements. Meanwhile, traditional media outlets published analysis, op-eds, and interviews, framing the story in multiple ways, some sympathetic to Meghan, others emphasizing the monarchy's need for order and protocol. Public sentiment was sharply divided. Supporters lauded Meghan for her ambition, resilience, and ability to navigate both Hollywood and royal spheres simultaneously. They saw the leaked memo as an attempt to stifle innovation and autonomy within one of the world's most visible institutions. Many highlighted the irony. A woman who had worked tirelessly to build an independent, socially conscious brand was being scrutinized for exactly the qualities that had propelled her into global influence. At the same time, critics framed the situation differently. To them, The palace's intervention appeared justified, a necessary measure to preserve centuries of tradition and the integrity of the institution. Headlines read things like "Royal Limits Tested" and "Duchess Overreaches Again," painting Meghan's rise as audacious, even reckless. Analysts highlighted the contrast between personal enterprise and royal responsibility, suggesting that the lines had blurred dangerously and that the leaked memo was merely the palace asserting authority. Talk shows and news programs fueled the intensity. Royal correspondents debated the implications for hours, dissecting Meghan's every public appearance, business move, and charitable engagement. Opinion segments dissected the power dynamics at play, a young duchess with global influence challenging an institution that relies on hierarchy and discretion. Every prediction, from potential restrictions on branding to possible re-evaluation of royal titles, added fuel to the fire. Audiences were hooked, consuming every detail with a mix of fascination and disbelief. Social media reactions added an unpredictable layer to the storm. Memes, viral threads, and commentary often amplified the drama beyond traditional reporting. Some memes playfully mocked the tension between Meghan's empire and palace protocol, while others framed her as a modern-day figure challenging centuries of tradition. In real time, supporters and critics clashed, creating a constant feedback loop that magnified public attention. The leaked memo, originally intended for internal review, had now become a global spectacle. Yet the media storm wasn't just about opinions. It had tangible consequences. Brands, partners, and collaborators closely monitored the situation, concerned about public perception and potential association with controversy. Every deal Meghan had in motion came under scrutiny, from lifestyle partnerships to media engagements. Insiders report that some collaborations were temporarily paused or renegotiated as stakeholders assessed risk. The leaked memo had transformed a private critique into a worldwide event, affecting not just perception but real-world business operations. The emotional stakes were enormous. For Meghan, the public reaction was a mix of support, criticism, and intense pressure. Every article, tweet, and comment carried weight, not just for her personal brand, but for the business empire she had carefully built over years. The scrutiny was relentless, the stakes unprecedented. For the palace, public attention added urgency and complexity. Decisions could no longer remain private. Every action, statement, or response would be interpreted by millions around the globe. Analysts began mapping out scenarios. Would the monarchy enforce restrictions? Would Meghan resist or adapt? Could she preserve her brand while adhering to palace expectations? Each possibility carried consequences for the institution, her personal empire, and public perception. Media outlets, never short of speculation, painted vivid possibilities, some predicting compliance, others anticipating confrontation, and a few daring to suggest unprecedented fallout. The story also highlighted broader societal tensions. On one hand, Meghan represented empowerment, independence, and the ability to navigate both tradition and modernity. On the other hand, the monarchy embodied continuity, hierarchy, and centuries of symbolic authority. The leaked memo and ensuing media storm became a lightning rod for these competing ideals, capturing attention far beyond royal enthusiasts. Discussions about gender, power, influence, and institutional authority flooded mainstream media, sparking debates about what is acceptable for someone in Meghan's position and what consequences should follow if those boundaries are tested. One of the most intense aspects of the storm was the role of global audiences. Unlike previous royal controversies, which primarily engaged British media and public opinion, this situation had an international dimension. Meghan's brand had transcended borders, and so had the leaked memo. Followers in North America, Europe, Asia, and beyond weighed in, expressing admiration, criticism, or curiosity. The global reaction amplified the pressure, transforming a palace intervention into a worldwide conversation. Every action Meghan took could trigger instant feedback, positive or negative, across multiple platforms. The palace itself reportedly struggled to manage the narrative. The leak had shifted power slightly away from internal channels, forcing advisors to respond not just with strategy, but with careful messaging. Statements emphasizing tradition, duty, and the need for alignment were carefully crafted, yet still circulated alongside speculation and conjecture. The media storm, in essence, had created a parallel arena of power, public opinion versus palace authority. The consequences of this dual pressure were profound and unprecedented. Even insiders within the palace reportedly expressed concern. Managing Meghan's influence, public perception, and global media attention simultaneously proved to be a complex, delicate task. Each decision could either escalate the controversy or temper it, but the leaked memo had set a chain reaction that was difficult to control. The interplay between private authority and public opinion created an environment where every move mattered, and every misstep carried risk. And then came the tipping point. As journalists, commentators, and analysts dug deeper into the leaked memo, new revelations began surfacing. Some suggested that the palace was considering unprecedented measures, restrictions on the commercial use of royal titles, limitations on public appearances, and even restructuring parts of Meghan's personal brand. The media frenzy amplified these claims, creating speculation that Meghan's business empire could face major disruption. Amidst the chaos, Meghan's team reportedly worked behind the scenes to manage perception and maintain influence. Legal counsel, PR strategists, and advisors coordinated responses, adjusted branding strategies, and evaluated potential risks. Every tweet, appearance, and partnership was scrutinized, calibrated to maintain relevance while avoiding conflict with the palace. The challenge was immense, navigating global attention, managing a brand, and dealing with royal authority simultaneously. But despite careful planning, the storm was far from over. Every day brought new leaks, new speculation, and new commentary. Public opinion swayed, tensions escalated, and pressure mounted on all sides. For Meghan Markle, the empire she had built with such strategy and precision now faced a test unlike any before. And for the palace, managing both tradition and a global media spectacle had become a delicate, high-stakes balancing act. Behind the gilded walls of the palace, a plan was unfolding. One that very few outside the inner circle could comprehend. King Charles, seasoned by decades of navigating both public scrutiny and private family dynamics, recognized the threat posed by Meghan Markle's growing influence. Not out of malice, according to insiders, but out of necessity. An institution that had survived centuries of upheaval could not allow a single figure, however popular, to operate with unchecked autonomy. And so, a strategy was devised. A multi-layered, calculated approach designed to curb her influence while preserving the monarchy's image in the eyes of the public. The plan was as sophisticated as it was subtle. It was not about confrontation in public or outright dismissal. Those moves could ignite a backlash and elevate Meghan further. Instead, the palace focused on control through structure, optics, and influence. Advisors reportedly broke the approach down into several components: legal restrictions, branding limitations, media control, and strategic positioning within royal duties. Each component was designed to limit power without sparking immediate rebellion, creating a situation where compliance would appear voluntary, even if subtly enforced. Legal restrictions were one of the first areas targeted. Sources indicate that palace lawyers conducted a thorough review of contracts, partnerships, and branding agreements tied to Meghan's ventures. The goal was to identify areas where royal authority could intersect with commercial activity. Leverage points included the use of the Duchess title, trademarks, and intellectual property linked to her public persona. By establishing these legal boundaries, the palace could impose limits on her business empire without appearing heavy-handed. Every clause, every agreement, and every public announcement was scrutinized for alignment with institutional standards. Branding limitations were another critical element. Meghan's team had built a meticulously curated empire, where visibility, media engagement, and social campaigns amplified her influence. The palace recognized that unchecked branding could eclipse institutional messaging, creating a perception that the monarchy itself was secondary to her personal empire. Strategic advisors reportedly developed guidelines to subtly reduce the visibility of her ventures, encourage discretion in public messaging, and prevent her title from being leveraged commercially. These measures were intended not to destroy her brand, but to contain its reach in ways that preserved palace authority. Media control was equally essential. Meghan's skillful use of media had been one of the most effective tools in building her empire, but it also posed the greatest risk to the monarchy. Insiders report that the palace engaged in proactive media management, cultivating friendly coverage, redirecting narratives, and ensuring that messaging aligned with royal priorities. The goal was to influence public perception indirectly, creating a framework in which Meghan could continue her work, but on the palace's terms. Every interview, public statement, and social media post became part of a complex chessboard where visibility and influence were carefully managed. Strategic positioning within royal duties was another layer of the plan. While Meghan's global influence and personal initiatives were undeniable, the palace sought to recalibrate her role in ways that reinforced hierarchy and tradition. This included reassigning certain duties, emphasizing collective responsibility over personal prominence, and encouraging alignment with established royal priorities. By subtly shifting focus, the monarchy could preserve her contributions while limiting the potential for independent actions that might overshadow institutional authority. The palace's approach was not without its psychological dimension. Sources suggest that the strategy was designed to create a sense of agency for Meghan while nudging her toward compliance. By framing adjustments as guidance rather than strict enforcement, advisors aim to encourage voluntary alignment. Every suggestion, restriction, and adjustment was carefully worded to preserve dignity, reduce confrontation, and maintain the appearance of autonomy, while still exerting significant influence behind the scenes. Insiders describe detailed planning sessions, where every scenario was considered. What if Meghan resisted? What if public support for her grew too strong? What if media scrutiny intensified? Contingency plans reportedly included escalation measures, from more explicit legal action to strategic public statements reinforcing the monarchy's priorities. The plan was not reactive.